I'm Odin, and today I'm going to build a Star Wars prop.
It's the Phase Pulse Blaster from the new Mandalorian series. And it's also from the Star Wars Holiday Special.
I am Boba Fett. Follow me, friend.
After finding some decent photos of the blaster itself, thank you D23, I scale up what I see and start on the stock. I sketch out the cartoonish shape on a piece of pink insulation board, and I add extra for the mechanical center. Now this part I'm going to cover with plastic later. I cut the board in half and glue it together with urethane casting resin. 5-minute epoxy would also work, but the resin is not nearly as thick and it's easier to mix. Both urethane and epoxy are good because they won't melt styrofoam or this pink foam. Nearly every other chemical glue will. Now water-based glues are also safe, like wood glue, but between pieces this big, the moisture can't get out, and it would take forever to dry. This will take 15 minutes. After the urethane sets, I cut out the stock with my scroll saw, and then I just start sanding. And I sand some more, and yet more sanding. I don't use my power tools this time because the foam is really soft and brittle, and scratches will show very easily. And also the shape is just so organic, hand sanding is just much better. I made a hole in the front of the stock to place the PVC pipe that I'm going to use as a barrel, and I got a piece of sandpaper taped to the PVC itself so I can round out that hole to be the right shape. Now overall the barrel isn't just round, it has a few different shapes to it. And to make the triangular section, I cut some smaller PVC in half and then glue it to the outside. I also tape the parts together and add more glue. Once the glue sets, I can wrap the parts in styrene plastic to get the triangle shape. The front portion of the barrel is a hexagon. First, I cut 7 pieces of 1/4-inch acrylic rod, and then I use a solvent glue to fuse them together. This glue is water thin, and it'll work its way between the pieces, gluing them together wherever they touch. Since I want a flat-sided hex barrel and not a stack of rods, I cut strips of styrene plastic and then glue them over the colorful rods. With so many layers, this portion of the barrel is probably going to be the strongest. Once the PVC glue is set, I wrap the triangle part with styrene as well, but I use a single piece, heating it to fit before I glue it. I'm going to use some Sintra plastic, this is a foamed PVC sheet, to cap the ends, sliding one piece over the PVC pipe. Now this is still PVC, so I can still use the same sprinkler pipe glue I use on the pipe. Let the glue set and then sand down the gray caps to fit. I also open up the front where the pipe is, because the hex barrel is going to need to go in here later. I glue strips of styrene to cover the seams of the caps. If you look, there's also some thin-walled PVC stuck in there. I cut a section out and squeezed it down to fit into the big PVC pipe, because the hex barrel will fit inside of this step-down. I'm using some black Sintra plastic to make the tuning fork in the front. I cut the profile shape of the fork and then add 4 more layers on the back portion, 2 on either side of the middle. So it ends up being about the same size as some thin-walled PVC pipe.
Yeah, that's fine.
I add another layer to the fork, but this is just on the outside. The full fork is going to be my middle layer. That way I can cut the thin styrene to make the slopes for the fork without a ton of messy sanding. I score a bend in the plastic and then I glue that right onto the back of the Sintra. I let the glue set, trim the excess, and glue the other side. I cut a notch in the thin wall PVC for the fork to set in. And I use my bandsaw to cut more PVC on an angle to finish the tuning fork. I glue in another cut piece of thin wall PVC so I can add glue to the hex barrel to the fork. I need to carve the corners off the barrel so it'll fit inside that pipe. I slip a small piece of thin-walled PVC over the hex. There's a bracket that I'll have to attach here later. I hold it in place with a hose clamp and glue it down with that solvent glue. I shave down the other end and glue it into the first part of the barrel. I try to be aware of keeping all the pieces in line. I don't want the blaster to look bent. They won't be perfect, of course, but I try. Got a barrel. Wow. All right. I need this little piece. Cut that. I got parts to go still, but wow. So it's kind of hard to see, but I've got the stock of the blaster mounted back here behind the table, and I did my best to make sure that I've got it level. My plan is to mix up more 2-part urethane resin and poured into the stock to glue the barrel in place. And I'm really happy that the stock didn't have any leaks, because I would have ended up with resin all over the floor. Once the resin sets, I remove the blaster from the table and cover the pink stock with 3 coats of wood glue. This will make the foam stronger, and it'll protect it so it can be spray painted. There's a small bar that goes across the bottom of the blaster. I drilled a hole in the pink foam for a 1/2-inch aluminum tube, and I made a thick piece of Sintra to form the front base.
Yeah. That's what I want, like that.
I rounded the front brace to fit on the hex barrel. I can glue these on after I make the mechanical center of the blaster. I cut styrene plastic to be the sides of this center box, and this time I am using 5-minute epoxy to attach the styrene. I want the box to be longer than I had made the pink foam, so I'll just cut the plastic longer. I also use epoxy to glue the aluminum into the Sintra brace, and then I glue on a ring of 1/2-inch CPVC over the tube, mostly for looks. After the epoxy sets, I start gluing on Sintra panels to build up the front of this box. It's an irregular shape. I just glue panels to fit as I need them. I cut a square hole, and then I cut one side of the front panel so I can slip it over the PVC barrel and then glue it into place. There's still more to add, which is going to hide this square. And I make a box that's a little bigger than that square hole. This time, I cap the end with a piece that just barely fits over the PVC. I clamp the blaster to my table again, and I glue the boxes together. And I add an even smaller box to the underside. This one has a hole for the 1/2-inch aluminum tube. I dump a lot of hot glue into the 1/2-inch hole. It mostly makes it into the pink foam. I place the aluminum tube in the hot glue and then glue the bracket to the hex barrel. And I had added another little ring of 1/2-inch CPVC to the aluminum tube. I cut a series of small styrene pieces and glue them onto the underside of this portion. Some fall over as I glue them in. I just let them be, and I keep attaching more until I make a small grill. On both sides, I glue down the one panel that is cut to match what I see in the show, but the rest are just panels and details that I use to decorate the side. I even cut a PVC connector to get that raised ring. Just a couple of panels for the bottom, and on the top, I placed the flattened hose clamp that I'd used on the hex barrel, holding it in place now with a couple of strips of styrene on either side, and then a couple more stacked just over the top of the metal. I heat up a Sintra strip and bend it to make a trigger guard. For the trigger, I just cut one from Sintra and then use craft glue to glue it into a hole in the pink foam. I have a local con that I like to attend that will not allow weapons if the trigger works or if it has ever worked. Now, I'm not sure how far they'll take that idea, so I just don't make any triggers that move at all, because you really can't tell in pictures anyway. I give the craft glue time to set, and I drill 1/8-inch holes all over the sides of the mechanical box. I have some rivets that I will glue in after everything is painted. I cut a piece of fluted 1/2-inch PVC pipe to use as a scope, and I glue on a scope adjustment ring and a front ring cut from a 3/4-inch PVC pipe, which I had also drilled out larger with a Forstner drill bit, because 3/4-inch pipe will not fit over 1/2-inch PVC pipe. I make a scope mount from more 3/4-inch PVC, but with a side cut open. So now it'll snap over the 1/2-inch PVC, and I can glue it to some Sintra supports. I drill a hole into the scope adjustment ring, so after it's painted, I can glue in a knurled screw that I got from an IKEA curtain rod. I spray everything with gray primer. Remember that wood glue sealer to protect the pink foam, otherwise it's just going to melt when you spray on primer. So I wasn't that careful spray painting it, and that was intentional. I've got my primer coat down, and then I got the basic areas brown that I want brown, and the basic areas silver that I want silver. I'm going to do the rest of it by hand. I start with the black, covering everything that is still primer, and painting over some of the silver paint. I can wipe some down later to make the black look like chip paint with metal showing through. I water down the black paint and wipe it onto the silver areas. I really don't want to just leave the spray paint alone because it'll always just look like silver spray paint. I do a black wash on the side of the silver box, trying to get it pretty dirty. I do just one side at a time and allow it to dry, so the black wash does not drip or run when the blaster is turned over to its next side. I wanted to paint the stock like how I had painted the God of War Leviathan axe, with streaks of different colors of brown, and then stained the whole thing with shoe polish. But for whatever reason, I did something wrong this time. Maybe it's my color choices. Did I let the paint dry too long? But for whatever reason, it didn't work and it looked really bad. So I'm actually going to repaint this whole thing later. Now I can super glue the rivets into all the holes. What am I using for rivets? Well, these are real rivets that I found at an industrial surplus store. It's interesting just how much this blaster has a look that hints towards steampunk. I super glue in the IKEA screw for the scope adjustment screw. I guess Mandalorians are just so good, they only need one adjustment on their scopes. Then I tried to stain the stock with shoe polish. This never worked. Don't bother. After I sealed the entire blaster with a flat clear sealer, I stained the scope and the front triangle piece with black shoe polish and water. This did work, and I was very happy with how it came out. I went back with some more shoe polish and water and stained all four sides again, making sure that the rivets got coated. I used some craft glue so I could glue in a front lens on the scope, which I had cut from a little piece of clear plastic that came from some retail packaging. The craft glue is going to dry clear and you'll never see it. I use a little rub and buff silver to add highlights on the main metal box portions, and some very light silver over all the rest of the black, the barrel, the scopes, all the black stuff. And I paint on some rub and buff gold to the scope mount and the brackets around the triangle. What's nice is the simple weathered look that I get from just not completely covering the pieces with gold. To fix the mess that I've made of the stock, I repaint the whole thing with a lighter chestnut brown and use a piece of torn foam to streak dark brown paint all over it. I streak the paint in the same direction to help it look a little like wood grain, and once this paint dries, more flat coat clear sealer. Most of the materials I used for this project I picked up locally. I put a part list in the description. The Amban Phase Pulse Blaster. It's a nice callback to the best segment of the Star Wars Holiday Special, friend. This is the largest scratch-built blaster that I've ever made, but it's not going to be my last because this is how Odin makes.
You stay here, friend. Luke trusted me. You must leave quickly, friend. We'll meet again, friend.
I want to thank David Curtis, David Theobald III, and all of my Patreon supporters. You guys really do make this show possible. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe. Have an idea for something for me to build? Please leave a comment below. And if you make any of these projects, you can send me a picture.